This is HBR News number 407. BLM revealed as a scam. Kentucky passes popular joint custody law, where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I hope you guys are doing well this week and you're laughing at all this absurdity so you're not consumed by it. This is our HBR News Show, and my name is Brian. I'm joined by Hannah Wallen and Dr. Ranimer Cam. We're going to be talking about the exciting, and interesting news of the week, and we're going to be doing it from our Badgerly perspective. So take a seat, get comfortable, and prepare your spines for the incoming cringe. So today we have a great show lined up for you guys. So it's a quick little summary of some of the stuff. We're going to be talking about a major Supreme Court ruling on Section 230. The group or organization known as Black Lives Matter apparently has blown all of the money that they made off of grifting. And, no one in this group is surprised at all. Kentucky has passed a joint custody law that has led to some interesting outcomes and more. So stick around. It's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So I was looking for something that would be kind of like, I don't want to say fun because the subject isn't really like fun, but something that would make for an interesting discussion topic for the fundraiser, but we never ended up using it, so I'm going to use it for the patron show instead. And this article is from The Guardian, and it is called, "I Tried the Foreskin Facial Treatment So You Don't Have to," where a man named, I can't remember his name, is Adam Gabat.
Sorry, a man.
Good yes, Lord. A man tried out the foreskin facial treatment.
I don't know why that's any weirder than a woman doing it, but it weirdly is weirder.
And cannibals do come in both sexes.
Yeah.
And I will call this cannibalism because this works by absorption of the nutrients through your skin.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, if your wife, girlfriend, fiance, boyfriend, whoever wears makeup, they have the same issue. If they're using makeup that has neonatal fibroblasts in it, there are some types of makeup that have that. They're cannibal.
Yep. So, in case you guys don't know, the foreskins of Korean newborns, South Korean newborns, apparently are being used to make a facial cream. Oprah Winfrey has promoted this product on her show, and so it's not like a fringe thing. It's not unusual, and
they admit to the fact that they're harvesting South Korean newborn foreskins, but the fact is they are also harvesting African newborn foreskins. But if they told people that, then it would be recognized as exploitation. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're not. People aren't recognizing the exploitation in an Asian community, and that's totally not racist or anything.
No, of course not.
It's not a new thing either.
It's been going on for decades.
On our radar since at least 7 years ago was when I first discovered it, and evidently, it's been going on for a long time before that. It's just been way out in the open in recent years because evidently nobody cares. I mean, some people care, but not enough people, and not enough care for the practice to be stopped, despite it being among the most barbaric practices ever in human history. I mean,
yep.
Aztecs cut people's heads off and watched them roll down a pyramid, but how much better is this than that? How is this not as bad as that, if not worse? These are newborn children.
Yes.
8-day-old children.
Yes. Like
Alex Jones was right. Alex Jones was right before the rest of us were right.
So we're going to read about this guy's experience with his foreskin facial treatment. And if you want to join us on the patron show, you have to become a Badger. So go to feedthebadger.com, set up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into our Discord and get you access to all of the bonus content. If you want to just try it out, you can have access to some of the content for free by going to badgernation.online, and that will also let you into our Discord, although to a restricted degree. I'll put it that way. And if you want to make sure that our videos and content remain accessible to you, and maybe even after YouTube finally like yeets us off of their platform, well, first of all, you should go to Rumble and subscribe to us there at HB Radio on Rumble. And I see the Rumble Squad. What's up, Rumble guys? But also check out our content where we have an archive of everything on honeybadgerradio.com and badgerfeed.com. So, with all that out of the way, let's get into today's stories. So we're going to start with the Supreme Court decision on Section 230. I just want to say that Lindsay, my wife, she did all the write-ups because Mike J is not available. He's obviously not on the show today. And Andrew, who also normally helps out, wasn't able to. So thank you, Lindsay. You are a champ. I mean, she did like 4 stories. So, all right. A Supreme Court 9-0 ruling now makes it officially legal for the Internal Revenue Service, that's the IRS, to secretly obtain the bank records of third-party individuals who are not under investigation. As the Epoch Times explains, because of this new ruling, you can be a person who committed no crime, not even be suspected of having committed a crime, and yet still, if the IRS is trying to collect back taxes from your friend, they can pull your bank records as well. And this entire process can play out in secret without you ever being informed that the feds have accessed your bank records.
So
if your employer owes back taxes, all of their employees are now subject to this. Mm-hmm. So if you work for a company where maybe the owner does their own bookkeeping and they make a mistake, the IRS could go trolling through your bank records. And I looked at this. So people are immediately going to be going, that's unconstitutional. That's unconstitutional. I don't think they fought this on the basis of search and seizure. Just looking at the story on another site, because Epoch Times wants to charge money to look at it. This is about whether or not a law that's already in existence that allows them to probe the bank records of the individual who is suspected of breaking the law has an exception for people who are associated with them, that they can't just also grab your records too. And there's no the Supreme Court ruled that there was nothing in the law that provided an exception. They only rule on a constitutional issue if you file a constitutional case. Mm-hmm. So I think that might be the issue. The notice not containing an exception or a limitation that says they can't get in your records. But what this basically means is that because of this ruling, if you work for a smaller company or you own your own company, and you're dealing with doing your own tax decisions, you're caught up in this. If you own your own company and your employee is under investigation because they lied on their tax form and got more money back than they were supposed to, this could conceivably allow your company's records to be looked through, rifled through by the IRS. And there isn't anything in this ruling that says that the IRS can't use that as fodder to start another investigation. So there's going to have to be somewhere along the line, somebody else is going to have to fight that battle. And it's probably going to happen when somebody who had no association with the criminality of somebody else's behavior in regard to their taxes, whether it was fraud, whether they screwed up or whatever, that's going to get their bank records gone through, and the IRS is going to treat them like a criminal, and then they're going to have to sue over search and seizure, unreasonable search and seizure. Yeah. And it's a possible thing. I mean, because the Fourth Amendment doesn't just protect your home. This is an argument I've heard from a lot of people too. Like, oh, that doesn't protect what you got in the bank. It doesn't protect what you've got in a storage area. Actually, yes, it does. It states that the Fourth Amendment or that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, so what you have on you, houses, so where you live, papers, meaning all of your financial records, all of your medical records, your legal records, and effects. So all of your stuff, your car, your purse, your briefcase, if you own it and it contains things, technically it's covered against unreasonable searches and seizures, shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause. And there's more to it, but basically, unless the IRS can prove probable cause to go after your records and stuff, if somebody actually were to take this to court under a Fourth Amendment ruling, I don't see how the Supreme Court could uphold what they ruled here, what the implications of this ruling here allows the IRS to do.
Mm-hmm.
But this will affect a lot of men simply because there's a lot of companies like construction companies, housing construction companies, and other things where there's heavy work that gets done or heavy cleanup that gets done that are family owned. That's where those kinds of mistakes happen. And the IRS really doesn't like to go after great big companies, but they will target the little guy because they know they can step on your throat and there is nothing you can do about it. And people will get mad at me saying this, but my family's experience shows it. They ignored a payment, $7,000 payment that my grandfather made on his taxes when he was in his 90s. And when we proved that it was paid, they came back to us and said, we're not accepting the check that you sent us and somebody in our office signed as proof of payment. So, you can take this to court, but we will come and get him and put him in jail. And he will stay in jail the whole time it's in court, and he will probably die in there before it's over because we will drag this out until he does. You want to go through that? That was actually said to us on the phone.
Yeah.
By an agent of the IRS. So that if they get power, they're going to abuse it. So God, I hope this doesn't stand, because this is going to affect a lot of men.
Mm-hmm.
They were willing to just put an old man in jail for nothing for the rest of his life to get a $5,000 or a $7,000 resolution, and be able to say they collected $7,000 in back owed taxes that were not back owed. So what do you think they're going to do in this situation where they can get into everybody's financial records just by saying, well, you have some association with somebody that didn't pay their taxes?
And for such a controversial or seemingly controversial thing, 9-0 is almost a suspicious ratio, like on more than one level. It doesn't seem like that kind of unanimity should be possible on something as apparently diverse as the Supreme Court. So through the tinfoil hat, it looks rather like some corruption has taken place. But it's not the first time it's happened. Various different Supreme Courts over the years have brought unanimous verdicts on various cases. And when you take off the tinfoil hat, you wonder, maybe there is a good reason for it. I realize the IRS is the last institution in the world anyone should be trusting. Mm-hmm. Tax is theft, after all. Tax is theft. That's not a big L libertarian statement. It's fucking true. Sorry, but it is. Yep. Property is not theft. On quite the contrary, stealing property is precisely what theft is. But if taxes are to exist, then they should be extracted without ideological bias. If they were, then a lot of shady people wouldn't get away with their shady dealings. All of this ties into our second story tonight, which we'll get to, the one about BLM.
Yeah.
If this ruling is what it takes to audit those scumbags and somehow redistribute the wealth that they scammed out of millions of global morons, then
that's REEEEEE distribute.
Maybe it could be a good thing. This is wishful thinking, obviously. Chances are pretty astronomical that it's just going to be used to bankrupt various enemies of the state while subsidizing the enemies of the people. But a boy can dream. It is just a dream, though, so stay alert, people. Even if the state does come for your enemies, it doesn't mean they won't come for you, if they aren't already. Even when the state is the enemy of your enemy, it is still your enemy as well. It's everybody's enemy. Yeah. Never forget that.
Here's the interesting thing about this ruling, too. This was supposedly on Section 230. In case you guys don't know, Section 230 is the legal provision that exempts online platforms like Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter from being held liable for content that's posted by their users. It's basically the small part of the US legal code that allows them to be treated as platforms rather than publishers. And after all of these months of going back and forth, when they reached this decision, apparently the Supreme Court sided with Twitter, Google, and Facebook and other social media sites. Although in an interesting turn of events, they actually sidestepped the question of Section 230 altogether, and all we get is this IRS thing. So that's just a more, because the reason why I was interested in this case, this thing, was about the Section 230 thing. The way that, these platforms like Twitter, Google, Facebook, and YouTube are able to essentially act as publishers rather than platforms. So because of that, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say this makes me wonder who was fighting this battle in terms of the exception to the ability of the IRS to get into your bank records without telling you if you owe taxes, because it makes me wonder if they were going through YouTube's bank records and chose to go after the YouTubers' bank records, because that could have implications even further. Like if they go after some YouTuber that has one of those popular channels, like the ones that are basically a scam, the life hack channels that show life hacks that don't work, but everybody watches them anyway because addiction, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. Or at least they get millions of hits. Like every time I see them, I don't recommend me this channel, click on don't recommend this channel because they suck. But in any case, like, let's say the IRS goes after one of those channels. Does that give them access to the bank records of, say, every YouTuber and every live streamer that live streams on a YouTube channel, whether they are gaining money from that YouTube channel or not? Like, how far does this reach? It's a very strange question to take to the court.
Definitely something to think about.
Yeah, it does give you something to think about, because it pretty much creates a situation where you get treated as, guilty until proven innocent in terms of going through your records for looking for a crime.
Yeah.
And one thing that's different between, and it's only marginally different because this is somewhat true of law enforcement agencies as well, but where you're dealing with regulations that get enforced as law, as opposed to law that was voted on by people that got voted into office. So like regulations as opposed to legislation. You don't have to do anything wrong. You don't have to violate a written rule for a government agency to decide that you are in the wrong, and they can apply a penalty for it. Anybody that's owned a business that, say, OSHA has been called in to investigate, something along those lines, you'd know that. Like, if they could get called in to investigate something and it turns out to not be true, they will find some other reason to fine your company. And so the IRS is like OSHA on steroids and crack at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's going to do maybe even angel dust. But it's going to do that times millions.
Well, I guess it's we'll just have to wait and see if any other developments come. I hope that things shake out in a way that is beneficial to us, but I'm not super optimistic. So, but we got to move on. Let us know what you guys think about the story in the comments. And did you see this coming? Like, were you pretty sure that wasn't gonna pan out for, in a way that other than the way it did, and also what's with the extra like IRS thing, and why aren't we addressing the primary point here that people are trying to make? Let us know in the comments. So I got a super chow from Meredith G. Thank you, Meredith. Shout out to Meredith G. All right. And she gives us $5 and says, HBR News 407, honey for the Badgers. The court isn't going to touch 230. They want to legislature to alter 230. I think that's what she means to say. They're gonna try to alter it, so they're not gonna touch it. Well, we'll see. I mean, I guess we'll see. I don't know what else to say. So let us know what you guys think. We're gonna move on to the next story now. We're gonna talk about Black Lives Matter, or buy large mansions, whichever one you want to call it. Financial disclosures reveal Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, which is basically the BLM activist group, not a person holding a sign that says Black Lives Matter on it. Those people are just the useful idiots for BLM, the group. They ran an $8.5 million deficit in 2022 while still paying out seven-figure salaries to relatives of the founder, Patrisse Cullors. Patrisse resigned as the executive director in May of 2021 after the public learned that she was spending $3.2 million of the funds on 4 separate homes. She was also accused of funneling $238,000 to a company belonging to the father of her child. However, she seems to still be keeping it in the family. 2022 tax records now show Patrisse's brother, Paul Cullors, was paid $126,000 salary as head of security, and I put that in quotes because he had no experience. Despite having no experience, he was like a street artist, basically. He made a total of $1.6 million between him and 2 other security companies. A lawsuit filed by Black Lives Matter Grassroots, so these are like, we talked about this I think last year or something, where there are these smaller grassroots BLM groups that were angry with the main BLM, like the head of the Hydra or whatever, because they weren't getting enough money. So a lawsuit filed by Black Lives Matter Grassroots accuses Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation board member Shalomaya Howard of diverting donations to his own coffers. The lawsuit accused Howard of stealing $10 million for himself instead of, quote, on-the-ground movement work, end quote.
Like, every activist movement needs to be grilled on the subject of exit strategy.
Mm-hmm.
A question that you would always do well to ask is, when has it gone too far? As we know, you can't get through to hypocrites by highlighting their hypocrisy. You can point out that they're employing a racial hierarchy with blacks on the top and whites on the bottom, and you can go, that means you're the real racists. And they'll just respond with, nuh-uh, black people have been oppressed since forever, and we're just tipping the balance in favor of equality. Finally, for the first time ever, for the 0th time ever, because it still hasn't happened. And like I say, the pertinent question is, then when has it gone too far? It's a question they don't want to address, because the obvious answer is it already has gone too far. Clearly, enough history has passed, enough quote-unquote progress has taken place to get us to the point that we're at. If this was 100 years ago, you might have a point. 100 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to create a Black Lives Matter movement, not even in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
If it was the mid-20th century, you would. That's what the civil rights thing was about. That was the actual Black Lives Matter movement. That was the moment in history when people were non-racist enough to give a damn about genuine inequalities in various legal systems. At that point, it had not gone too far, in my opinion. But now you're at the point in society, half a century later, in history, where you can run any old grift, where you can do absolutely nothing but rile people up and steal their money and spend it on mansions for you and your friends and family, while cities are burning across the world because of you. You do zero good for the world, but an incalculable amount of needless, wanton destruction. And the only reason you can get away with it is because you wear the label of Black Lives. That's a clear indication that it's already gone too far.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think anyone could do that in the name of white lives now or 50 years ago? Not a chance. Nobody has got away with that since the Nazis themselves. So you're not tipping the balance in favor of equality. Frankly, equality was reached in the 90s. At least it was as close as we ever got, or probably ever can get. The 90s were the good times created by strong men. It was when all these equalities came together and we were able to just celebrate our differences without being divided over them. So there was nothing left to do but playing Nintendo and eating pizza. It was awesome. I feel bad for the
Those
for
were the
Zoomers.
days.
I feel bad for the Zoomers who never experienced it. Like, for real, almost nothing bad happened in the 90s, relatively speaking. I mean, Tony Blair and Bill Clinton were sowing the seeds of our nightmares, but they hadn't yet fully germinated when it was still the 90s. But nothing was ever good enough for the oikophobes, the Marxists, the children of the Frankfurt School. A world in harmony was not a win condition for them. They never did set a win condition. They never had an exit strategy. All they ever wanted was to punish straight white men for the crimes of their ancestors, or just the crimes of past tyrants to whom we would never even related. And this is where we are now. If you're shitting on men, shitting on whites, shitting on cishet people, you can get away with anything. Nothing is too much. They have never gone too far.
And you'll get paid too.
That's how we got here so fast in 25 years or so. Because while we were enjoying ourselves playing Nintendo and eating pizza, these bastards were in the floorboards, chewing away at the foundations of our civilization and doing it for its own sake. It's because of the white pills, folks. Beware the white pills. They make you naive and complacent and deluded. It's the good times creating weak people. So it's long since time to get yourself on a steady, healthy diet of black pills. Black pills matter. Hashtag TM.
Now you have to look at the way women do things versus the way men do things here as well. And it's not that men never get vengeful, but when you let the thing that happened that feminists hate the most, when you let boys be boys when they are growing up, and they're going to be rough and tumble, and they're going to fight with each other, and they're going to punch each other right in the face, right? They're going to set boundaries by working them out physically, and they're going to learn some things, one of which is revenge never pays off. Vengeance is useless. It has no purpose other than to deal with feelings that don't have any real bearing on reality, right? It's easy to get mad. Probably the absolute easiest thing you can ever do in your life is get angry. It's hard to control what you do when you're angry, right? It's even harder to control what you do when you're angry than it is to control what you do when you're high and or drunk, right? Anger really is the biggest hurdle. But boys learn to deal with that by working it out with each other. And adults really only need to step in if one of the boys has such an unfair advantage size-wise that he's going to do permanent damage to the other kid, or he's going to dominate and not learn to work with the other kids. And then you have mentoring to do, right? That's what the adults are there for, to mentor the children, not to prevent that working out. When boys grow up setting those boundaries with each other and using violence and learning to not use violence because it sucks, right? Then they learn not to do shit like Black Lives Matter, right? They learn instead to work together between themselves, each other, and authorities to, again, iron out boundaries. So instead of having big marches with thousands of people yelling about dead cops, they change the rules. They work on what the rules are that are allowing bad things to happen. They figure out what the truth is in terms of the statistics that are being batted around, and they work on the problem and solve it. And they have an end game. They have a win strategy and an exit strategy, right? Women, on the other hand, will hold some stupid thing that you said 20 years ago against you in an argument about something that has nothing to do with that and is not even remotely related to it, right? You might be discussing the budget and whether or not the new dress she wants fits into the budget right now. And she's mad, and she brings up something you said about her driving while you were dating. That has nothing to do with it, right? And she'll shove that down your throat and twist the knife. She'll withhold your kids from you if you get divorced, not because it's good for the kids, but because it hurts you. Girls don't grow up setting those kind of boundaries. They grow up using relational aggression instead of physical violence to hurt each other. And when they get really aggressive about it, adults give girls the worst possible advice. Well, maybe it's because nobody likes you because of who you are. Maybe it's your fault that, you know, Susie has started a campaign of emotional terror against you. And it takes an unusual situation for a girl to grow up and learn to do it the other way. All right, to like, all right, I'm mad about this. I'm going to go off and do some thinking, and then, you know, come back later and figure out, all right, what would be an actual victory here, as opposed to just hurting the other person, and how can we accomplish it? And, you know, how, by the way, how can I form peace with this enemy so that we don't keep hurting each other?
Yeah.
Right? Girls don't do that very well, and women don't do that very well. Instead, they lie, they cheat, they steal, they do whatever it takes, right, to hurt the person or the entity, the demographic, the business, whatever. It's part of the reason why we have this massive lawsuit culture we have in the United States right now, because of women behaving that way. And so you get a situation with Black Lives Matter that was mostly run by women. It was mostly organized by women. It started
not just
by women,
women, but feminist women.
Right? And women latched onto it. But women of, not just women of color, just like not just black women, brown women, Hispanic women. It was white women. And they had to be told, you know, you can't use this as a vehicle for your anger.
Yeah.
So if you want grifting to be less of a thing in situations like this, right, where you know there's discrimination, where you know there's just like the men's rights movement. If it was entirely run by women, I wouldn't be able to be part of it.
Yeah.
Right? If it wasn't like the first,
you mean like if it was
run
by like libertarian feminists like Hannah Cox?
Yeah, even if it was run by feminists that called themselves ANCAPs, which is antithetical to feminism,
but yeah,
right? But I wouldn't care. They're still all women. If there weren't women and men working together, and if it wasn't something that men had been doing for themselves for quite a while, I wouldn't be involved in it, because I wouldn't trust at all that it was not going to be like Black Lives Matter. Right? And working with an organization like our organization is run by women, but you have to run into women like Allison and Karen that routinely get accused of being men on the internet because they don't act like women. Like, there's no way I would have worked with normal women.
Yeah.
To do something like this, because it becomes an exercise of power, an exercise of revenge, and a money-making project that does nothing but turn out more financial gain. Right?
Yep.
No support for any other growth or benefits. No information sharing. No nothing. Like, and Michael Keller, Allison and Kara do not bite unless you deserve it, or you ask them very nicely.
Ah.
He said, run into Allison or Karen, isn't that dangerous? I heard they bite.
Yeah.
I'm the one out of the whole group, probably I'm the one with the worst temper. or the best temper. I don't know. I keep getting told that it's cool.
Sometimes we need
I
that.
don't feel like that about it.
That's not how it appears on streams.
Yeah.
I know.
You don't often yell
Okay.
quite
Yeah,
like those two do.
Out of the three of us, I'm the only one that actually had to go to anger management. So I learned some tools so I don't yell as much, right? But and it wasn't like court ordered anger management. It was I knew it was me ordered anger management, but it was because bad things were happening because of me. I was doing bad things. So there you go.
Yeah.
Allison barks, Karen barks. I don't yell as much. Right? Nobody here knows what I'm like if I lose control when I'm mad. Nobody's gonna find that out either because I'm not gonna ever lose control again when I'm mad over being mad. But when I'm mad, I retain control and focus now. That's dangerous too, though, for if somebody really were to create a situation where I had to do something. But yeah, it's I entirely blame this on the fact that our society is so used to what I just described that they let women get away with the shit. Right? You have this organization that didn't do anything. Right?
Well, they made a lot of money off of other people's misery. They made a lot of money off of creating enough resentment and anger to destroy multiple cities to the point where they're never going to recover in our lifetime.
They didn't accomplish anything. They didn't have a project. They didn't work on anything. Their entirety of their activities were to gather people together, go places, raise a ruckus, light fires, break things, go into people's homes and kill their pets.
Yep.
Right? And then move on to the next place. It was just entirely an intimidation thing.
It was. I think that was the goal. I don't think they ever intended on helping anybody, much less black people. In fact, they probably did more harm to the black population than anyone else ever.
They didn't lobby. They didn't have any kind of news reporting organization that alerted people, here's what's going on in this area that needs changed. Here's something that you can call your congressman about. They didn't have any kind of organized how to fix this problem, how to get people to understand. And they didn't help people understand how to deal with police either. Like you couldn't get advice from Black Lives Matter. All right, if you are stuck in a situation where you think you're at risk because of how a police officer is acting, here are things that can de-escalate the situation. No, they didn't do that, right? They did none of those
because it wouldn't serve them,
right?
That it wouldn't serve them to do that. Like if people learn how to negotiate, like cops are not running around looking for an excuse to kill people. They're just not. The only time something like that happens is if the other person is resisting or they're aggressive or they've broken the law and they don't want to have their vehicle checked but things go out of control. Primarily, so I know there are people who hate cops, but I'm sorry, we live in the real world where you need them. So most of the time,
most cops prefer, the only time that they have to fire their weapon, discharge their weapon, is on the practice range.
Yeah,
well, just because
exactly. But
in a situation like that, it means their life is in danger. Right?
Yes.
You very rarely get the guys that are like, there are corrupt cops, there are bad cops, there are good cops, right? And there are cops that are bad at their job too.
Sure. Of course.
No one as a little boy or a little girl wants to grow up and be the cop that makes the news for shooting somebody.
Yeah, but
cops don't go out looking for an excuse to kill people. But in Britain, they certainly do go out looking for an excuse to arrest people.
That happens here
too. They have quotas as to how many people they can press charges against. And in Britain, they can get away with it because they know they can wander down to any house to arrest someone for a tweet, and there's not going to be someone with a gun at the other side.
Yeah, it's not over like a real crime. It's over like not wearing a mask.
Don't give up your guns. Never give up your guns, or you'll get that shit in spades like we do.
Yeah, so and that's what I'm saying. But Black Lives Matter has no interest in doing anything productive. They never did. They were a feminist organization. They were just trying to get political influence and lots of money, and they got both. They managed to essentially like run the grift without a hitch at all. Okay, no problems. Why? Because our society is so not racist that we're willing to let people like this run roughshod over everybody and never question them. Because and on top of that, because they're also a feminist organization run by women, we won't call them out for that either, even though they will tell you explicitly they're going to destroy the family. They don't want men involved with their children's lives. They're okay with single motherhood because it produces more criminality, because it produces more teenage pregnancy, because it produces more dysfunction, which they can then in turn blame on white supremacy, and nobody questions it and nobody calls them out, and it just keeps going and it keeps going. And that is the point. So they do have a goal, and they are succeeding, and they have done it. And I'll tell you right now, despite all of this, despite the fact that they took all their grift money and they gave it to their friends and family, which no, I don't see how anyone is surprised by that, they will come back. Then when the next time a black man is killed under any circumstances that could be spun as racist, they will be there. They'll rebrand if they have to, but they will be there, and the grift will continue because nobody is willing. Nobody has the balls to basically say, no, you guys are grifting. Like, and I don't like the word grifter. I think it's overused in a lot of ways, but this is a primary example of that. This is a grift because they are not doing anything useful. They are creating the chaos. They are welcoming it. And you know, I'm a little heated about this because when the George Floyd thing started, okay, I was very skeptical of the narrative. I mean, when even going back to Trayvon Martin, I was like, this is fishy. And BLM, they said that they started to organize like when the Trayvon Martin thing happened, but it's not because they thought there was racist shit going on. It's because like they were like, well, this is an opportunity for us to use the thing that we claim does not exist, which is sympathy for black people, as a way to make a lot of money off of guilty white people and everybody else, right? And then give that money to ourselves. And they did that with Trayvon, they did it with Michael Brown, they did it with every instance, even though in every instance the story was not as simple as they said, because there was way more going on. And even though things like this happen like every day, all over the world, all the time, but they're not, none of those are politically useful, so they get ignored. Even though they claim that they care about blacks while also wanting to use black men's dead bodies to promote their message and make money off of it, which is literally the only useful black man to Black Lives Matter is a dead one. And not even like a dead one under normal circumstances, a dead one under circumstances that can be exploited to their benefit. So when a black man kills another black man in the south side of Chicago, they don't care. That doesn't matter. Fuck those guys, right? They're not useful. They're the products of single mothers, the same thing that we promote as an organization. They want this. They want people killing each other. They want chaos. They want lawlessness. They want destruction. They want that because it demoralizes people. It makes, and then they tell blacks this is the white man's fault. And, you know, I don't know how many of them, but a not insignificant number believe it. And they're like, well, yeah, it must be. Otherwise, why am I not an engineer, millionaire person? Because like the system, man, is keeping me down. And that it just keeps, it's a never ending cycle, and they will continue to promote it. And this is not just for the, you know, Black Lives Matter. It's for any of these, like, you know, let's say social justice groups. They're not even necessarily about race, but it just so happens that the belief is that this will work especially well in the United States. So they do it, you know, and so like in the UK, you know, they won't necessarily say that, but they are doing that. But instead, they'll make it about colonizers. It's the same narrative. No, it doesn't.
And you know why it works especially well in the United States?
What?
You know why it works especially well in the United States? Because the majority, the vast overwhelming majority of the population here, if you don't count politicians, right, who are their own grift, the vast overwhelming majority of the population here already cares about Black lives. Black lives already matter to the public.
They wouldn't do it otherwise. It's like how feminism says we live under a hateful patriarchy, yet they make tons of money because men actually don't hate women.
No, if men didn't care about women, feminism would never get a
it wouldn't exist.
Who would fund it? Who would pay for it? Who would help feminists?
Yeah.
Who would pass laws to protect women if men hated women?
Yes, it's the same thing. They know the model works, and so they just like reorient it. But the people doing it are still feminists. So it's the same people, and it's like the tactics just have a slightly different skin, and they just use different language, but it's the same. And that's what I'm saying. It has no interest in, like feminism claims that it cares about women's issues, right? But they don't. They obviously don't. They're actually doing more harm to women than they are to men in some ways. And the point is not to fix anything. The point is to always set things up so that you need more feminism. You always need more feminism. Give us more money, give us more power, give us better jobs, make sure that we are taken care of. And that's the whole system. That is a grift. That is what it is meant by that. So someone who's just here's what I would say about the whole grifting thing. Just last thing about that. If men's rights activists could be grifters, I don't think it's possible because it's a very unpopular position. It's not recognized by the left or the right, okay? And so why would anyone think that this is a good way to make money when it's literally you have to work really hard to even get people to consider that perspective? If I wanted to get rich quick, I'd be a feminist. And I've been saying that for years, way back when we started. I could just say I care about women and I can make money off of that. But I'm doing the opposite. I'm saying women, we need to hold them accountable when they act up. We need to hold them to some kind of a standard. And that actually would help them. But it wouldn't help me, and it doesn't. So BLM, I've lost friends over this that I've known for decades because they cannot, they're just programmed somehow to just oppose me. And all I'm doing is saying, hey, this is obviously like a grift. And when something happens in the news that can be exploited, I step in and say, wait a minute, let's wait until we have all the facts before we start acting crazy, and of course it doesn't work. Now Minneapolis, I have a friend who lives in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is a shithole now. That's
how moral panics work.
It's a true shithole. And so
that's how moral panics work.
Yes.
And all of these grifts are based on moral panics. There's the kind of moral panic where you decide a group of people are evil and you round them up and you do evil things to them in the name of good, right? We are very aware of that as a society.
Yeah.
But people still haven't yet figured out that playing on one group's fear of being oppressed and exploited while playing on the accused group's fear of being the bad guy, racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever name you want to use to call the oppressor group the bad guy, right? The labeled oppressor group the bad guy. Those are both playing on people's fears. And then you also play on the alleged oppressed group's resentment, anger, pain, suffering, sense of disadvantage. And you play on the alleged oppressor group's fear of being the cause of an oppressed person's bad experience, right? That's another moral panic.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really all about exploiting fear on both sides.
Yeah, it's about exploiting emotions.
And it is a precursor to the other kind of moral panic where you round up supposed bad people and do evil things to them in the name of good, and then only later on you realize, gosh, we were the bad guys.
Well, BLM is all about that. Antifa too. When you look back at the Summer of Love, billions of dollars in damage, thousands of injuries, and 24 murders at least. So the death of one person, which by the way was proven to be an overdose, proven, okay, resulted in 24 deaths that did not have to happen. At least 24. And yet, nothing. Nobody. And the worst part is that the people who supported this shit, you can approach them now and say, look at the damage that this did. Why did you support this when I told you should have waited? They will not look at that and say, you know what, I was wrong. That nobody, like, the balls that it takes to say that is like, it's unfathomable. Like, nobody has them, okay? Like, almost nobody, at least. And that's all that's all it would take, is for somebody to say, you know what, I was wrong about that, and I'm going to be careful next time. I'm not saying I don't need the apology. I just need you to understand that you supported something that caused the deaths of people, unnecessarily. And not only that, because that's just like Summer of Love. Imagine, like, look at the kind of like the crimes that were committed. Remember the guy that drove into a Christmas parade, killing a bunch of people because he wanted to kill white people?
His name is not Darrell Brooks. He does not go by that name. He's never heard anyone of that name.
Well, what was it that made him think that was a good idea? Could it have been the narrative? Could it have been the resentment that was built up? I mean, like what now I know this isn't a race thing, but the Tennessee shooter that killed, like, those adults and children, what drove them to that? I mean, I don't think it's the hormones. I don't think it's the pills. I think there was a lot of resentment and anger, and it came out because they were responding to something that wasn't real. So, at least in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, this stuff doesn't, like, it doesn't happen without, unfortunately, tragic consequences, and yet we're being told that we have to focus on the one person that died of a drug overdose because he was around somebody else. And people cannot wrap their mind around that and just say, you know what, I think I was wrong about that. And now, because what that means is they have to face the actual, like, consequences of that belief. So anyway,
it's the sunken cost fallacy. It's the most insidious section of all of this, because once you're lost in the sunken cost fallacy, there's no coming back.
Yeah,
because you can admit to a small mistake. You can admit to a white lie. Dare I say white lie? But once a mistake is big enough, once a lie is, dare I say, black enough, it's easier to keep telling it than it is to admit that you were wrong.
I mean, I'm not saying it's easy to admit when you're wrong. I know that it's difficult, but people have to swallow their pride.
The hardest thing to admit is that you picked the wrong team.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that people really don't deal with well. And we do have, because of how our species evolved throughout our civilized history, and even our pre-civilized history, where we were just, tribes and families and stuff, without necessarily having laws and elected leaders or even leaders that couldn't be ousted just by a few angry people. We've always had to pick a team. Our species has always been strongest in groups instead of individually. And we've always been so weak as individuals that survival relied on group mentality. And the really tough thing is, once you latch onto that group, it's a terrifying thing to let go, because then you're not part of that group anymore. You don't have the protection of the group. And we don't have so much a need for physical protection from a group in the real world anymore, right? We're not being hunted by wolves. We're not sharing our living space with other animals that prey on us that are big enough for us to act like that around it. Like, the animals that prey on us now are tiny and carry diseases, but we still have that instinct, and it's a biological instinct, and it's something that people will, if they don't have it presented to them in that way. This is why you probably did this, but you have to be conscious of it, because your mistake is you gave up individual individuality and freedom and the protection of your civil rights against government interference and your recourse against criminality and against false accusations of racism or privilege or whatever, or if you're not white, you gave up your individual non-victimhood, right? You adopted victimhood that
Yeah.
isn't even yours, and you went through pain and suffering that you didn't have to, all because you have this instinct to address things as a group and to compromise your own skepticism and your own individual thought processes in order to maintain that closeness with the group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
that will.
when you
Go ahead.
don't have that instinct, you get diagnosed with a mental health condition, with a wrongness about you, I guess you can say. I can't think of the right word at the moment. But a dysfunction. You get diagnosed with a dysfunction if you don't have that need for a gang
Yeah.
to be part of as a human being. They call you autistic and they shuffle you off to the side and say, "Well, you shouldn't be
because
here."
they want you to join their gang. I
Yep,
think like all these industries are in on it. Like they're pretending to be the underdogs and they're literally the establishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
But
that's why I think they locked us down. I think that's why they separated people and they isolated people, because the majority of people who support these radical groups, and I don't even like to say radical because they're, like I said, they're mainstream, are people who are just looking to belong to something. And so they just support whatever they think the most popular narrative is. And oh, look, the media supports all the same popular narratives that groups like Black Lives Matter and Antifa support. In fact, they run cover for them. So it's like, well, why don't they seem to be the good guys? Because everybody seems to agree. So I'm going to join that, or I'll at least support that, passively. And so like it's and if somebody dissents, if somebody comes along and says, hey, did you know this? Or are you skeptical of this? I mean, you can look at like all kinds of things that people have responded to, not just like, the George Floyd thing or the BLM things or the Antifa things, but you can look at, let's say, a certain virus that was going around and how people responded to the kind of like precautions they were told to take. I mean, it forms tribes, but it's really not like two polarized groups. It's one like authoritarian polarized group and then everybody else. It's like I said, it's everybody else versus these crazy people over here, and they're not all the same exact people, but there sure is a lot of overlap, because there are people who they want everyone to join their cult and they want to use force if necessary, and that joining that cult comes with a whole bunch of beliefs that you have to have. One of which is feminism. That's how they got in the door, but all the other stuff comes with it. And so like, you can't just get feminism. You gotta get all the DLC and the mods. So I think it is using people's need to belong, especially young people, when you think about it, as a means to say, well, we will treat you well if you join this cult. If you give us your pronouns, if you want to help smash the patriarchy, if you hate buying shit and owning property, you join that. You want to eat the bugs, you want to live in the pod, you want to do all of the things, and it's always the same people who mostly agree with all of it. You want to mask up, you want to get the jab, it goes on and on. So we got to reach net zero. Or was it carbon net zero? I don't even know what it is. Basically, a lot of people
safety net zero is what we need to reach.
Yeah.
We need to stop saying, sure, okay, every time somebody comes along and says, here's another safety net, put this around your neck. No, it's not a leash. It's a safety net. Take it. No, I'm not taking the leash. Stop calling it a safety net. Go to hell. I'm doing my own thing.
Exactly. But yeah, you got to do that. And these people will exploit that. So that's why this BLM thing is it's very important, because it's not just that. There's so much more to it. And you always know what's going on when you look closely at what their stated goals are. Now these aren't necessarily achievable at this stage, but they're certainly working towards it. So you can't you can't be passive in this. And I know it's not easy because I've lost friends, like old friends, because
They weren't your friends.
Huh?
They were never your friends. That's an important point.
I know. I mean, I guess I don't know. It's tough, but
well,
I have friends though.
Sure I can say that.
I have friends that get it.
Here's the thing: people will love you and care about you, and still abandon you if they think that you are in the wrong because you're not part of the group. And it goes right back to that instinct and that programming. And unfortunately, we've had 4 generations now of Americans who have been programmed even further into that mentality. Like that mentality exists, but it's not insurmountable naturally. Right? It's something that you can fight. You have to fight it. If you don't fight it, you end up doing stupid shit. But it is a lot harder to fight after you've been through 12 years of the public school system, after your parents went through 12 years of the public school system, and your grandparents went through 12 years of the public school system, and their grandparents went through 12 years of the public school system. And all of those generations were taught to be part of the group, to value being part of the group, to be embarrassed about being excluded from the group, that it's their fault, and they're always in the wrong if the group disapproves, right? That if they screw up, they're going to be embarrassed in front of their peers, and that if they get excluded from the group, it's going to impact everything else that happens to them for the rest of their lives, right? So then you get the reinforcement, the next generation, where the teachers do that to the kids, and the kids go home and tell mom and dad are like, well, no, that's what I learned growing up. That's right. Well, you end up not being able to do the right thing when the group is doing the wrong thing, because you are taught that the group is always right.
All right, well, I think this is overall, though, good news, I guess. Like, at least hopefully people will, like, see this and realize, that they have to be less prone to emotional reactions, because that's what these grifting groups, like, they prey on that. So hopefully, people will learn, and they will be more critical. And also, like I said, the true goals are usually just right there. Like, they like when word got out that one of their primary objectives was essentially to create like a society where children are raised by tribes, like a communist one, I guess, and there were no fathers. They were dismantling the patriarchal family, which is something that all feminism wanted anyway. And then people but they were putting it out there because they thought nobody would, actually like see it and call them on it. And then they got called on it, and so they removed it from their website. So that's their goal. And that is the goal of, I don't care what you call yourself, but if you are in any way associated with feminism, that's your goal. So you got to call them out. All right, but anyway, let us know what you guys think about this story in the comments. And we are going to move on to the next one. This is an interesting story as well that I thought is kind of good news, I guess. So, Texas legislature has given final approval on a new bill seeking to ban diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in publicly funded universities. Under Senate Bill 17, Texas universities would be required to dismantle their DEI offices, programs, and mandatory training. Hiring practices would also need to be colorblind and sex neutral. Remember, though, this is a government thing, so they can only really affect government institutions, not things like privately owned companies. State Senator Brandon Creighton, a Republican and sponsor of the bill, tweeted, quote, "The elimination of diversity, equity, and inclusion offices will result in millions in savings for taxpayers and restore a culture of free inquiry, meritocracy, equal opportunity, genuine innovation within Texas higher education," end quote. Critics of DEI claim that the principles are rooted in Marxism, because they are essentially vehicles for left-wing radicalist or racialist ideology and partisan political activism. While Texas universities may need to drop their DEI offices soon, and this is in a related story, Chick-fil-A appears to have their own vice president of DEI. While this position's existence is just getting attention on social media now, Chick-fil-A has had their own DEI vice president since at least 2021. Most large corporations
they were accused of homophobic practices.
Yes,
not long ago, right?
Yeah, it was before 2021. It was like a while back, I think. And well, they're still like considered essentially the devil. And I don't mean that in a Christian way, because I believe Chick-fil-A is a Christian company. But like,
well, the founder was Christian, but I don't know if it's like, didn't they boot him?
I don't know. I mean, but my point is that I think that the DEI thing was potentially a way of, trying to get better PR, because of the supposedly the guy donated to, I think he donated to charities that were against gay marriage or something like that.
It's not just PR anymore. It's a different initialism. It's called ESG. You're about to allude to it in the next paragraph.
I'm going to get to that. So while Texas universities may need to drop their DEI offices soon, Chick-fil-A appears to have their own vice president of DEI. While this position's existence is just getting attention on social media now, Chick-fil-A has had their own DEI vice president since at least 2021. Most large corporations have some form of DEI or ESG, which you guys might know about ESG, environmental, social, and governance. It's basically the what is it called? The social credit score that you get in China. It's the same thing. But Chick-fil-A has been generally well respected amongst conservatives due to the company's religious values until now. In recent weeks, several companies have been punished through conservative boycotts. You guys probably know Bud Light, Target, etc., for promoting LGBT activism and marketing towards children. Now some are turning their ire towards Chick-fil-A. Last week, James Lindsay wrote on Twitter that he agreed with the boycott calls and made demands. Quote, "We must demand that Chick-fil-A fire their entire ESG and sustainability staff and partners, including DEI, referring to the left-wing environmental, social, and governance framework. Ideally, we get them to confess how they got caught up in this racket, and we return support," he added. Conservatives might actually be able to pull this one off. Now, before you guys say anything, there's a couple other things I wanted to add. ESG, environmental, social, and governance, might be an antitrust violation. This was an opinion piece written for the Wall Street Journal, of all things, by Mark Bernovich, and they said the biggest antitrust violation in history may be in plain sight. Wall Street banks, because banks are also under ESG, they have to function under that as well, and money managers are bragging about their coordinated efforts to choke off investment in energy. It's nearly impossible to raise money to explore for oil and gas right now, and we may all be experiencing rising energy costs because of this market manipulation. Russian and Chinese aggression overseas is also exacerbating inflation. So the ESG thing is a much bigger problem than just like, the hiring practices. It's basically being forced in every conceivable way. Now, if you are in a state or a province that will, do whatever they can to make this like unacceptable, like make it a law to ban it or whatever, then good for you. However, it's not only in the governance aspect, but it's also in the private sector. And the purpose of this seems to be so that, people can use it to make a lot of money. And here's the thing too about ESG and DEI. The people it's going to hurt the most are small businesses, not giant corporations. Now, it's important to boycott. I think that works, and it's really easy. Like, just don't eat there, or don't shop at Target or whatever. Don't buy Miller Lite. Get the Chinese drink or whatever it is. Get something else, right? Not hard.
Well, don't get the Chinese drink. That's
yeah, I know. It's not Chinese, but there was a brand of beer that microbrewery. Yeah, go to a microbrewery or a local place. Just don't buy the product. Maybe quit drinking. I don't know. But my point is, those things are not difficult to do. So it's really not a huge deal. And again, it will hurt small businesses because when you boycott larger businesses, they're just gonna. And I'm not saying it's not useful. So don't mistake what I'm saying. But they're going to survive that because they're going to be able to go to the state and say, "Can you give us some money? Give us some bailouts?" And the banks are going to do the same thing. But the small businesses, the mom and pop shops, they're not going to be able to do that. And so it's going to hurt them. That's why this has to be fought at every single level, and it can't be considered acceptable. I think the idea of meritocracy itself is a masculine idea, and this is basically like, what happens essentially when this sort of like feminine way of thinking gets into our politics and our products and our companies. And that's what we have to deal with now. So, Chick-fil-A, you better do something because I think you're going to lose a lot of business, even though like they haven't made any overtly woke content yet. But you saw what happened to Bud Light, and I think it's happening to Miller Lite because they made that gross feminist ad, and Target. So, and they're all losing money. Disney losing money. So anyway, it works. Those are my thoughts.
I love how all these stories we've done tonight sort of relate to each other, sort of sequentially and
right.
It's like poetry. It rhymes, and yeah, I think we fall into a trap when we speak of banning DEI. You know exactly how these hypocrites are going to react. How dare you ban things? You can't ban what we're doing. This is authoritarian.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, what is DEI? It's the practice of banning people along oikophobic lines. It's no whites allowed, no men allowed, unless they identify as women, and so on and so forth. And that's really where we need to start the argument. If what we're doing is banning the practice of banning, then we're not banning, are we?
Yeah.
We're saying you're not allowed to not allow this.
I think it's about the words we use. I agree.
Yeah, the this in question being genetic demographics that we're banning based on nothing but their genetics. This is the opposite of authoritarian. And if the word libertarian might ruffle your identity politics, folks, go ahead and call it anti-authoritarian if you prefer. Like, is it okay to ban Nazis from your institution? Is it okay to ban Marxists from your institution? Frankly, no. In either case, as far as I'm concerned, they can have whatever beliefs they like, but if they're just beliefs and not actions based on those beliefs, then by banning them, all you're doing is persecuting thought crimes.
Mm-hmm.
But what we can ban and should ban and do ban, as it happens, is the active practice of Nazism. If there are Nazis who are in your institution actively banning anyone except the Aryan race on the basis that the Aryan race is best, then we can go ahead and ban that from happening, because the only thing we're banning is the banning. If only we could do the same thing with Marxism, and I mean Marxism.
Yeah.
You can believe whatever you want, but if you start banning people based on your delusional perceptions of who they are, based on their intrinsic properties, then your banning should be banned. But Marxists had this terribly clever idea of not calling it Marxism. Mm-hmm. They call it diversity, equity, and inclusion. They call it emotional, social learning. They call it environmental, social governance. And when all that shit falls through, they will call it some other euphemistic initialism. And they'll get away with it as long as at large we keep giving these left-wing extremists the benefit of the doubt that we would never give to right-wing extremists.
Mm-hmm.
If a Nazi refers to their Nazism as merely patriotic, we can tell the difference. It's the difference is when it becomes explicitly racist. What with patriotism having nothing to do with race. Well, DEI is explicitly racist.
Yes.
Like it could barely be more explicit in its actions, in its practices. they will claim it's not racist because they don't call it racist, and because they define racism as something that only exists in a one-way, one-dimensional paradigm where it's impossible to be racist against white people, and that, by definition, is an explicitly racist paradigm. So yeah, don't fall for it, folks.
Agreed. The word diversity means no white men.
Yeah,
that's all it means.
Yeah, that's what they do. They take the words and change the meanings to something other than what they normally mean.
Yeah,
and don't call it banning when you ban the ban hammer. I know it sounds like a rather squirrely paradox, but it's not. It's called freedom. It's called standing up for freedom, like in principle. Don't let yourself get squirreled out of it through newspeak. Yep. Stand your ground. Grr. R.
So yeah, it's fair to say that, but at the same time, if you are prohibiting a policy from being put into place, that's banning that policy. It's just that these legislators maybe aren't as good at PR as the bad guys. And I'll call them bad guys because they are basically Darth Vader. They're basically
evil. It's evil.
The Empire. They're the ones trying to squeeze people's freedoms away and force conformity and create a universe of all clones, or at least people who are as much in lockstep as clones. And when it comes down to it, the government's pretty limited in what it has a legal right to do. But what it can do is tell publicly funded institutions, universities, department outlets like the Job and Family Services Department, any kind of initiative that is publicly funded, like if they have a program for summer reading for kids in poor neighborhoods, all of this, they can say, well, all right, you receive public funds, you receive those public funds directly. It's not other people paying you. Like, it's not like people taking food stamps to Walmart to buy groceries. It's you get a check from the government. You get a direct payment from the government. Therefore, you may not use in your hiring practices these policies because they are discriminatory.
Yes.
You may not use in your personnel policies where you determine the boundaries between your employees and how they are allowed to treat each other and how they have to treat each other. You can't use these policies because they are discriminatory. They take away people's civil rights. And that's fair, right? And it's fair to say these policies in these public institutions are banned. Don't get caught in the trap of people telling you that it's the same as telling a private university that they cannot have a course on what this policy is, or this set of policies is, and have debate over it, because that's not true. It's not the same to say you can't talk about this as it is to say you can't force this on people using government funds as the vehicle of force. It's perfectly fair for the government to ban that. Yeah. And that's the argument we need to be able to make. We need to be able to point out to people, you're lying, first of all, when you say that those are the same things, that's what's being done. This isn't censorship. This is the prevention of an abuse of power using government funds. Yep.
And you have to directly tell them that they are lying. You have to say that in front of as many people as will listen, because if you don't just say you're a liar and this is a lie, then they'll be able to worm out of it. You remember when Elon Musk called out that guy that was interviewing him and said, "You're lying"?
Yeah.
And the guy was like, oh, blah, 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 because he was lying.
And he didn't know what to do after that. He was just kind of like,
I didn't think you'd just say that.
Paralyzed.
Yeah.
He didn't expect that. Most people don't do that. Most people will know that they are being mistreated in a situation like that. They'll know that they've been put in a trap, and they'll watch the trap close around them, and they'll watch the spikes come down and impale them.
Yep.
And then they'll be like, that asshole trapped me.
Yep.
But one of the reasons that guys like Musk are so successful is because when they see something like that, they absolutely call it out. They break the rule of politeness. Oh, yes, this person invited me here to talk. I can't be rude. Yes, you fucking can. They invited you here under false pretenses.
Mm-hmm.
They invited you here to humiliate you. As soon as you understand that, you can be as rude as you want in order to protect yourself. And you should.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, polite society has become too polite to defend themselves against social predators.
Yep.
And that is why shit like DEI, or I prefer to call it diversity, inclusion, and equity. So therefore it's die, because it is the death of society.
It is. I like diversity, inclusion, and equity better too.
Yeah, when you're defining diversity as only one kind of thing. You're defining inclusion as exclusion of one particular group of people, sometimes two, men and sometimes whites, right? That's inclusion, is everybody but these people. These people are excluded, right? And equity used to just mean the value of your home if you were able to sell it for what it is theoretically worth, what the bank thinks it's worth. That was your equity, right? The idea of equity as a different type of equality is completely fake. It's as real as unicorns and dragons. Well, I can't say dragons because technically those exist. They just don't breathe fire and fly. They bite you and let you wander around and die in the hopes that some other dragon gets to eat you. But they're as real as unicorns, right? That's it.
Yeah.
So and if you want society to survive, you have to get rid of this. And that's what's happening. I'm glad it's happening. And make no mistake, right? The primary target for exclusion here is men. It doesn't matter if you're black or white, doesn't matter if you're tall or short, right? It's men.
Yeah, because they know that men are the primary obstacle. That's why. Men
are the primary obstacle to communism, honestly. And men are the primary obstacle to allowing communism to take the mask off and just be feudalism, because that's what it really is. There is always a leader in a group like that. There is always somebody who is more equal than everybody else. There is never an example that lasts even, beyond a few weeks or a few months of and even the one in Washington State, the chap or the Chaz or whatever it was called.
The Chaz?
It took days. It took days before the first warlord took it over.
Yeah.
Okay. And started committing crimes against people that, you couldn't do anything about it because the government wasn't in there, right?
They weren't helping anyone, but there were also no cops. So
no cops. Right?
Yeah, this is the thing that's what these people want. They want people unarmed. So they're against the Second Amendment. They want to take away our guns, and they don't want us to have cops. What kind of environment does that create?
And he was running things.
Chicago, New York,
and he was running things there for within days. And so when you have a situation where they're like, "Oh yeah, we're all going to be equal. We're all going to be equal," what do you get? You get feudalism.
Yeah.
You get one person being in charge.
Yep.
And now that's not to say that you have to have government to prevent that. Like, if everybody was allowed to be armed, if everybody was allowed a chance to defend themselves, to fight for their freedoms, you wouldn't have that situation.
Yep.
Because everybody would have just as much power as that guy to take over or not. And with that many people being able to fight back, nobody can take over, right?
Yep.
But in that situation, in a communist situation, all you have to have is one person that's like, well, I know they said no weapons, but fuck that idea, I'm taking over. And you now have communist feudalism.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And also, it's worth pointing out this DEI thing. It seems to me that it's unique to the West. So, because in a country where there's not really like a significant number of white people, it just doesn't work. So, they're not going to do this in India. They're not going to do this in Japan. They're not going to do this in Saudi Arabia. I'm sure they wouldn't put up with it anyway. They're not going to do it in Africa. unless it's South Africa, but they will do it in the UK, they'll do it in Europe, they'll do it in Canada, they'll do it in the United States, because that's where the target is. We're the ones living in the countries that are flourishing, and they want some of that, and this is how they get it, because that's all it comes down to. So,
they might crack down on white people in those countries, but in that case, it's technically xenophobia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess so.
And they can get away with it, and ostensibly white nations aren't going to give a shit because
I mean, and all those countries that I listed, they may not have like DIE or ESG stuff, but they still have feminism, so it doesn't. They're just a few steps behind.
That's the universal form of oikophobia, and that's why I keep beating this drum of oikophobia, and that's why I keep beating this drum of misandry, because misandry is the first kind of oikophobia that infects your society as it becomes more and more decadent. Like and the West is obviously the most decadent society. We've had it so easy for so long that we can afford to indulge in this counterproductive practice of oikophobia and misandry. And let this be a lesson to the rest of the world. I think the rest of the world is going to learn it long before we do, and when we finally do, it couldn't possibly come a moment too soon.
Yeah. All right.
By the way, ESG is just straight up feudalism. You realize it is not your government doing this, right? It's not just your employer doing this to you. It's not something that was an agreed upon, like the governments of the world got together and said, we're going to do this. That's bad enough, right? That's bad enough. But this is a group of just flat out, straight up rich people that many of them have generational wealth, that are the financial elites of the world, whose only power comes from controlling a significant amount of the owned property and owned financial equity in the world, which equity is basically imaginary money. So they control the real wealth and they control the imaginary wealth. It's why they wanted to get a handle on electronic currency. Electronic currency scared them when it was, digital currency scared them when it was out of their control. But as they are starting to take control over it, now they want people to go to it because they control it. They can control it better than paper money. You can't have access to it. You can't keep it in your pocket and hand it to whoever you want to.
Yeah.
You have to have the permission of the gatekeepers of the internet, the gatekeeper of the website, the gatekeeper at the other end, the banks, so on. So this is literally the kings and queens, princes and princesses of the financial world using control over that real and imaginary property to control the behavior of the serfs. And what they have done by doing this, bypassing elected governments, is to make the politicians the serfs in charge of the serfs. They're they're now the taskmasters, right?
Sure.
The gauleiters, the lords and ladies, the people that really don't have any power of their own, but they do have the power to punish you for disobeying. They're going to get a little bit cushier lives than the rest of us.
Right.
That's basically where we're headed with this the system, unless the public takes control by refusing to consume.
Yes. Well, and there's the big challenge, because this is the thing. Like, the problem is and it's very simple, it's women. The problem is women, because women are the largest consumers. Women buy the most crap. Women don't care what, this or that company is actually doing. They care about what it looks like they're presenting. Women are the ones that are going to be buying the LGBT trans stuff at Target. Women are going to be the ones that are going to be pouring money into it because they spend more money than men, and they also have more money spent on them than men. So unless women rein in their consumerism, this might not be a big enough of a change. And that, I'm sorry, it's true. It's women. They're the problem.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So
if you got a daughter, one of the best things that you can do for the future economy is to teach her early on, way early on, that practicality is way more important than how she looks. And that includes practicality of movement, practicality of storage, being warm enough in cold weather and cool enough in warm weather, and all those things, right? And B, that clothing that's uncomfortable and spending all that time putting on makeup and doing her hair and all that shit is wasting half of her life, if not more. She learns that before she gets out of school. The whole rest of her life is going to be significantly easier. I cannot emphasize how grateful I am for my allergies every time I think about that, because I didn't get a choice. By the time I was in junior high school, there was one kind of makeup on the market that I could wear. Like when I was on stage in choir and stuff, I could have, visible eyelashes and visible lips and stuff. And by the time I got out of high school, I was using food coloring so everybody could tell I had lips when I was singing. And that meant the rest of the time, if I didn't have to do something to be visible from on stage, I'm not wearing makeup. You can't pay me to wear that shit. Like you couldn't, if someone said, I'll pay you $10,000 to advertise our lipstick, I'd be like, I'm sorry. I don't like, having hives. Not going to happen. And I have saved hundreds of dollars a year, thousands maybe. Some women spend $300 a month on makeup. I when I read that, I was freaked out. Saved quite a bit of money on all the other hair products and skin products and stuff that women have to use because makeup damages your skin. Even the best makeup damages your skin. And it made me more conscious of the price of clothing and everything else. If every girl was raised with that mentality, you would get rid of a lot of pollution, a lot of the things that these environmental organizations complain about, right? And you would also, women would save a shitload of money, and your credit card bills would not be so high.
Yeah.
Like the husband ends up paying for all of that. The father pays for that when she's a kid, and the husband pays for it when she's an adult. It would save men a lot of labor, and it would get rid of some dangerous jobs too. That really nobody should be doing.
Yeah.
It's like I was saying the other week about the difference between a soft narcissist and a hard narcissist. Like one of these things is an actual medical condition. The other is really just a description of a personality default. It seems most women by default are soft narcissists. And I'll go ahead and say, by contrast, most men are soft autists, but that doesn't affect the economy in the same way.
Right.
Like but a soft narcissist, if left to their own devices, will eventually become a hard narcissist to the point where they can't think any other way. They will just keep grinding away at this road until they're at the point where they will keep doing it to their own detriment. They will kill themselves with their hard narcissism. And so it's up to you as parents to teach your daughters, oi, your appearance isn't that fucking important. I know it seems like it, especially when you're a child, especially when you're a teenager. You just need to knock some sense into them. Not literally, not with actual violence.
In Minecraft.
Some kind of discipline needs to happen to prevent your soft narcissist daughters from becoming hard narcissist women who will become the death of society. So and I don't know how you do it. That's up to you as a parent. I'm not a parent, so I can't lecture you. Whatever.
Or
do something.
At the very least, like, just women should just not allow themselves to be manipulated because they're you know when they're shopping at Target in the pride section, I think that the narcissists, so maybe not all women, maybe a lot of women are boycotting it, but there are some that are like, you know, I want everyone to know how much I support the LGBTQ community, so I'm going to buy products from here, right? It's not even about anything real. It's probably going to end up in the trash at the end of June.
Oh,
you know,
Rush Limbaugh hit that with the perfect sketch. Well, it wasn't really a sketch. He just did it. It was just a thing he did, and he had a television show for like 3 years, and he quit doing it because the networks relegated him to like 3 o'clock in the morning in order to, you know, like pretty much smash the show. I kind of wish that the YouTube / internet video age had started sooner, because I think he probably would have been the biggest. But he did this segment where he came on and he had like 6 different colors of ribbons on his lapel, and started out, "I care more than you."
Mm-hmm.
And then he did this whole thing about, you know, yeah, you have a ribbon on your clothing, but I have all 6 colors here of these different types of, and this one's for this and this one's for that. You know, I have my different, and that was the point, obviously, being that all that it did was, you know, you're showing support, yeah, but what are you accomplishing?
Mm-hmm.
If there's a whole room full of people and all of them have AIDS ribbons, does that mean that less people are going to die from AIDS?
I'm reminded of the Seinfeld sketch.
And yeah, and I think there are other people that picked up on that and did similar like ridicule. Where it really hit me was, of course, first when Rush did that, and then the other one was, I was fairly new, I think, at the time on Facebook, and I had connected with all my friends and family, and somebody sent me this stupid breast cancer awareness thing.
Yeah.
That, you know, don't tell anybody what
Were
it's
you not
for.
aware that breast cancer existed before?
Yeah.
You made aware?
I had no idea that you could get cancer in your tits. It was terrifying. Like they know no. But no. I get this inbox from somebody, this message in my inbox from somebody, you know, a post where you like to hang your purse, say, "I like it," and then finish with that description, and then don't tell anybody what it's for, so that when they ask you, you can say it's for breast cancer awareness. And I'm like, oh, okay, but then what? You know, where do I tell them to donate? What else? That's it. That's the whole thing. And I'm like, don't send me this stuff, because the previous year they'd done that with "what color is your bra?" And I'm like, I can't participate.
Oh my God, it's
like,
cringe.
Why not? Well, I don't have a color of bra. Is it just white? No. You know, like back then I was barely an A cup. I didn't wear a bra. Why would I do that? You know? So I couldn't post a color. There was no color. She's like, well, just make one up. But this pissed me off, because I had already said, don't send me this shit. There isn't anything. Tell me where to do a march or something to like the March of Dimes, where you get money for marching and then you give it to this organization and they pay for research or something. Don't do that shit. I don't do that shit. And I get it back again, you know, I'm like, I got it from like 6 or 7 people eventually, and I finally got fed up. So I posted on my profile page, "I like it hanging from the rocking chair in the living room in front of the window where everyone can see."
Yeah.
That was the end of that. Nobody ever sent me another one of those things again. But that's, women do that. Like, it's absolutely meaningless gestures to feel like they've done something, but then they will spend hundreds of dollars on cotton clothing, like all cotton clothing that's dyed funky colors, not considering the fact that they're doing significant damage to the water supply in some foreign country where the dyeing is done. And like, just to grow a single t-shirt, the cotton that goes into a single t-shirt takes like a year's supply of water for one person.
Yeah.
It's just insane. But they won't vote for politicians that will take the regulations off of an alternative fiber for clothing that is non-allergenic or hypoallergenic at least,
Mm-hmm.
and looks lovely without ever having any dye added to it, because they're afraid of Mary Jane.
Yeah.
Mary Jane's more popular than they are, right? That's
sure.
women in a nutshell.
Yeah, I know. It's more important to be seen as virtuous than actually be virtuous. Okay, so we got to move on to the last story. This has become a longer sausage than I expected. But I do have a couple super chats. So Egregious Charles sent us two, and I think the second one is a correction on the first one. So if it's okay with you, Charles, I'll just read it once as a corrected version. So he gives us $7 total and says, everyone else in the fast food space is worse than Chick-fil-A. Choosing them for a boycott of all the fast food places is drooling idiocy. All I will say is that maybe you shouldn't eat at any fast food place, and you should just go to a small business if you really want some fast food, like a little greasy spoon.
You can cook your own food.
I have a point to make about this.
Cook your own
I have
food,
a point to make about this.
Of course. Go ahead.
And I'll try to make it as brief as I can, but here's the thing, right? You already know McDonald's is all in for this, right? You already know Burger King's all in for this. You already know Wendy's, they're all in for this. All the big places that are big corporations, international corporations that have been for a long time, all in for this because it gives them more of a leg up financially over companies that aren't. Because the big banks, the financial elites, the kings and queens of finance are doing it already. They've been doing it for years. This is established, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Chick-fil-A was not. They were a holdout. And they were liked because they were a holdout. It's fair if they capitulate, if they cave, to turn around and say, you know what, you caved, we're abandoning you. Fuck off. We don't care about your company anymore. We're done. Because they were getting, people were using them as an example. Look, I have Chick-fil-A. I'm virtue signaling because I'm supporting the company that is a holdout. Now they're not a holdout. That support deserves to be withdrawn.
Uh-huh.
Now I can't really boycott them because eating out is not a thing that we do very much. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, do your best, but sometimes I understand it can't be helped. But as long as you're and you can do whatever you want. I'm not telling you who to boycott. I won't do that. I mean, I know that it's easy for me to do because I mostly cook my own food or Lindsay cooks it. But yeah, I mean, if it's not something you can do, then whatever, that's fine.
When you got food allergies, fast food becomes a challenge.
Yeah. Hey, I don't know, anyway, just if you have suggestions on places for people who they just can't not do that, maybe leave us a comment. So I got to move on to the final story because we're a little over, and I think this is good news, so I have to share it. Wait, my bad, guys. Sorry about that. Okay, so last year, Kentucky passed America's first shared parenting law. Now, the Administrative Office of the Courts has issued a report that the law is as effective as it is popular. The law created a starting point that both parents have equal child custody time if the parents are fit caregivers. Kentucky's family court caseload and domestic violence cases have been rising, but in early July 2017, that trend abruptly stopped and family court cases and domestic violence filings began declining. Why? According to the Courier-Journal, July 2017 is when Kentucky implemented a partial version of this shared parenting law. The next July, Kentucky's full-blown shared parenting law took effect, and the family court caseload and domestic violence filings dropped even further. This is despite Kentucky's growing population. And this is a quote from the article. Shared parenting supporter and president of Parental Alienation in Kentucky, Alexandria Beckman, said, quote, "It's common sense that shared parenting laws lessen parental conflict. As a domestic violence survivor who speaks with alienated mothers every day, I can personally state that Kentucky's shared parenting law is lessening domestic violence," end quote. Family Court Judge and Child Support Commission Chair Lucinda Masterson stated a similar opinion about parental fighting in general. Quote, we've had a lot fewer since the shared parenting statute. We've had a lot fewer disagreements about parenting time," end quote. So, kind of a good news, a white pill, as it were.
So I got 3 points to make on this, and I'm gonna keep it really brief because I've been working on a video on the importance of shared parenting and discouraging divorce, both things. So I'm not gonna go over it on this. But the first thing is, it is in the state's best interest to have shared parenting because it makes it easier for both parents to earn the financial support their family needs. It is in the child's best interest to have shared parenting because the child's outcomes from the mentorship of both parents and having that relationship and that love from both parents are like every single bit of the outcomes the child has from being raised by an adult are improved with two parents rather than just one parent. And it's a bigger detriment to lose time with the father than it is to lose time with the mother. And when they don't have shared parenting and divorce is just encouraged out the wazoo, it's usually the father that gets taken away from the child. And it is good in different ways for both parents because the father loses out quite a bit when they lose their relationship with their child. It makes them suicidal. It makes them despondent. It destroys quite a bit of their psychology, their psychological health, and the mother becomes an entirely different person when she's trying to control the father, and it just you lose yourself trying to control another person. So this is good for everybody. But I'm gonna actually make a longer video on this, so I'm not going to take up a bunch of showtime on it.
Okay. Random Cam, do you have any thoughts?
No, I haven't written anything down.
Okay, that's fine. I know. That's fine. I think it's good news
as well because the sausage has gone long already.
Yeah, we're over on sausage. So all I will say is this is good news, and I hope that we can use it as precedent for similar sort of like, similar laws in other states and even other countries. Hopefully. So let us know what you guys think about this in the comments. Is it good news to you too? So I have a couple super chats, and then we're gonna wrap it up and go into the patron show. We're gonna be looking at the guy who tried foreskin facial cream. So that should be interesting. Yeah. Land Ray, I think that's how you say it, or Land Ray, gives us $20 and says, "Hello, folks. I'm still having trouble with my Badger account. Haven't been able to subscribe to a monthly contribution. Sent an email to Allison. Really love you guys and miss not having another ICMI since 2019. I'll remind her. I mean, Allison handles all that stuff. I'm not really involved with it. Was somebody going to say something?
Well, we still could. I mean, if we schedule it for August, that gives us.
Oh yeah.
I know that there is one in the works. That because Save Indian Family Foundation actually messaged me about it. So on Twitter. So I think it's going to be in India this year.
Oh yeah, that's right. I heard that.
Bangladesh.
I heard it was going to be in India.
I'm not going to India. Fuck India.
No,
my problem is it doesn't matter where it's going to be this year. I'm not having serious health problems, but I'm having health problems, and I'm not traveling this year.
No,
I'm not sure about next year. So
when I say fuck India, I don't mean the country or the people. I mean the fucking diseases that we get just from drinking the water there.
Yeah, right.
But that's really
it's a long way
there, actually. I was hoping for one to be there, and now that there's going to be one there, unless something changes dramatically with me. I'm not going to be traveling. So
if there's one in USA or Canada, then
this is
I'm
I don't want people to worry. This isn't something to worry about. This is just something I have to deal with right now.
Sure.
But yeah, in all likelihood, there probably won't be one this year either.
Yeah, it's probably if it's going to be in India, it's probably going to be like, that's kind of a big ask from us. I don't really have the money to do that. So, but you know, maybe we'll have another one in the future. All right, but anyway, thank you for the super chat, Landray. Now we got one more from Solomon Grundy for $10, and he says, "Let's go, KY represent Kentucky." That is, yes, Kentucky. All right, so with all that said, we're gonna do the after show now. This was a long sausage. And we're gonna head out. So if you want to join us again, go to feedthebadger.com, set up a monthly subscription, and hopefully it will work and you'll be able to join us. Otherwise, if you want to support us, remember the fundraiser is almost over. We're hoping that we can get across the finish line there before too long, and that is feedthebadger.com/support to help us out there. All right. With all that out of the way, let's go into the after show. So if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today, and please, please, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we will talk to you all in the next video.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.